There's Kaylee.
Oh, Kaylee's in here. Nice. All right. All right, well, it's just a minute after 3, so I want to welcome everyone to our Innovation Roundtable. Sounds like we're going to kind of do the inverse of what of the conversation that Eric attended this morning. We're going to kind of turn the conversation over to you. So my name is Marita Herkert Oakland. I am a co-founder of Reloomed. We are a visual thinking facilitation and training agency here in Madison. And we're in our first year, so we're still in getting our, figuring things out and getting things all, finding our way. But one of our favorite things that we do is host roundtables like this, where we just have an open conversation with people. We can kind of show you what it's like to experience this visual thinking that we do, which is live drawing during our conversations. But we also get to just build some community and hear from everyone here that has really interesting and amazing things to talk about. So today we're going to talk innovation. I am not going to have us all do introductions and stuff right now, but I'm going to give a few ground rules and a few expectations for the time. First of all, I want us to get connected, and when we're in person, that feels a lot easier than when we're on Zoom. So throw your contact information in the chat and do your best to connect with people that that you're hearing from today. Anything that you're interested in or want to talk more about. If you have book recommendations, blogs, podcasts, anything like that that come to mind as we're talking about things, throw it in the chat. Give each other as many resources as we can. We find that that's always a really valuable thing that comes out of these conversations. Other than that, we're hoping that you will talk as much as you're willing and able to. If you want to throw your video on, that's great. If not, that's okay. We are not forcing you to do anything that you're not comfortable with, but we're going to just kind of set the stage for conversation. Hi, and see where it goes. So Eric, do you want to introduce yourself quickly and then start sharing your screen and we'll get into this?
Yeah, so my name's Eric. I'm the other half of this facilitation operation. I manage the pen, the marker on the screen. And so we both do different jobs in this of listening, and mine is to listen and try and reflect that in the visuals. So I hope all of you who choose to share or bring something to the table will feel heard by what I draw. And I'm hoping that those of us here and those who maybe couldn't attend but see this later will benefit from all that we have to say here. So thank you all for attending and looking forward to what everybody contributes.
Absolutely. And thank you so much to Forward Fest for all of the coordination that you're doing for this event and so many others in this week. I know we've got all of those supporters of Forward Fest that we've got up here to make sure that we see. Here it goes again. Excellent. So the other few ground rules for our conversation, Eric's going to be live drawing the conversation. When he is putting things up on the board, there's a few things to keep in mind. One, you can interact with it as much as you want, as much as you feel comfortable. If he puts something on the board that you really connect with and you really feel like is a huge, an important point, call it out. If he puts something on the board when you're talking and it doesn't quite reflect what you were trying to say, that could be for a couple of reasons. First of all, he just didn't hear it correctly. By all means, correct him. Or you may have said something that was a little bit different than you were intending. And so that's a really helpful thing. Okay, the recording is all good now. So that's a really helpful thing to be able to interact with. We find that having things live drawn is a different way of seeing and experiencing a conversation. So we really hope that you all can participate in that today. So that being said, let's just see those sponsors real quick. And thank you to all of them. Thank you to all of you who are joining us today. Some of you I know are talking at different events and participating in different events. So thank you for taking time out of your Monday to be with us. All right, let's jump into the conversation, Eric. So I'm going to put up a couple of questions and a couple of ideas that we can start talking about, but really we're here to talk innovation. When you saw the topic for today, what came to mind? What are you interested in? What are you percolating on? What other conversations have you heard during this time at Forward Fest that you're like, oh, I want to dive more into that? I've got a few conversation starters here up on the board, but wherever the conversation goes is where it goes. We have a full enough group that I think the raise hand feature is going to be helpful today so that I don't miss somebody. But if you just jump into the conversation, that's probably going to be acceptable as well. So I guess the first thing that I want to hear is, what are you thinking of when you're thinking of innovation? Are you thinking of new companies, let's start a new thing? Are you thinking like, I want to change the way that my organization is working, we're going to add some new things in there? What does innovation mean to you? And I'm okay with silence too. So, all right. Hey, Matt, what comes to mind?
I'll kick stuff off.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think of innovation because there's idea. I mean, you have just sort of raw ideas or dreams or just sort of being creative, but innovation is something that you can put into practice with benefits to somebody. It could be a product, it could be a process, it could be, innovation can happen anywhere, right? So it can happen in government, it can happen with a nonprofit. So it doesn't have to be something that you sell, but it needs to be something that delivers a benefit to somebody in a unique way.
Absolutely. Thank you. Anybody else on what that means to you?
Hey, I know I would say problem solving. I think innovation is finding problems and then instead of just stopping there, solving those problems.
Yep. So don't just talk about it, do something about it.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Absolutely. So yeah, I think we can keep a pretty broad idea of what innovation means, but if you have concrete examples or things that you're exploring or things that you're working with, I would love to hear about those. So I guess my first thing that I want to know about is, where are you, how are you finding support for innovation here in Wisconsin, in the Midwest, in Madison? Is there support for innovation where you are working and with what you're doing?
Well, there's the Forward Fest.
Yeah.
There are a lot of organizations, and I think if you look at a lot of the host organizations that are like kind of running events, mentioned Starting Block earlier. So their Starting Block Diane had an event earlier today. The WEDC has a ton of programs. Campus has a ton of programs. There's Merlin Mentors. There's MadWorks. There's Generator. There's GBeta. I think there's more than ever.
Absolutely. I would agree. And I think that can get a little overwhelming with how many options there are, but to be seeking out support and having other people that are there to help out with what you're growing and how, there's a lot more options.
Is there a way that we see innovation happening in Wisconsin or the Midwest that happens differently than other places? Is there a way that Midwesterners innovate that's unique?
Andrew, I'm actually in Nebraska, so I'm part of the Midwest part of the equation here.
Oh, that counts.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's why we added Midwest, so nobody would feel left out.
I've always found inspiration with the music and art scene and just making things happen, even if there wasn't money or even a lot of resources, and that DIY aspect. I pull a lot of inspiration from that. And then it helps to have venture funds and universities and all of that part of it. But in terms of like the spirit of it, it's kind of a punk DIY for me.
Great. Yeah, Benny.
Yeah, I know. I've always noticed that there tends to be kind of playing to our strengths as a state. And so manufacturing as well as biotech and kind of things that are coming out of the university, I think those are uniquely Wisconsin, especially the manufacturing innovation. We do a good job there. Or agricultural innovation. There's a lot of ag tech companies in Wisconsin and the Midwest.
Absolutely. Do you feel like there's gaps in support for innovation in what you are doing? Anybody here in what you're doing and what you might need?
always thought we could use, I mean, I think where we trail, and this is more, kind of in the startup world, everybody complains about lack of access to capital oftentimes. I think the bigger challenge we have is that we just don't have as much in the way of good advice. Because there has not been as many. If you look at the level of companies that have gone public or been successful, we just have far fewer examples here. So there's far fewer folks that have been there, done that, than in some of the other major markets. And so, yeah, so I would say growing access to capital. Kind of looking at it, Eric, but I think it's actually just getting better advice. I think is a bigger deal.
Interesting.
I know one thing that I hear from entrepreneurs sometimes is that investors here are a little risk averse compared to some other parts of the country, and so there's kind of a very high bar for what your company must be able to do before some investors in this part of the country will be interested.
Has anybody here experienced that?
Well, there's maybe the higher bar, Benny, but if there's a higher bar, then we should have a higher hit rate of success, right? If that's the case. I think where it manifests itself is just in the deal size. If we're looking at funding, so like we're not there are a lot of ventures I see that are probably underfunded for what they're trying to do relative to the competing ventures here. So you can't get as many people to write big checks for a big time idea because of that risk aversion. Not that they won't write it, but you're just not going to have as much capital to work with. And that can be a problem.
For sure.
So I wanted to introduce myself. I'm Keith, and I've been in the Madison area. Hi there. I've been in the Madison area for a long time. Worked for a major corporation in marketing communications. A big supporter of innovation. That would be American Family, and internally, American Family has been promoting that throughout their divisions, and has acquired a number of startups. And so, corporate wise, I think it's really taken off there over the years, and some of the other large companies. Madison as a whole, I think, is very innovative. Years ago, I started attending a group called Accelerate Madison, which no longer exists. I think it was absorbed into another group, but they had monthly meetings, startups, anybody from the founder of Skype through some other startups where they'd present their existing status of their ideas or their innovations through others. So I think the Madison area and Milwaukee's really taken off too. And even my hometown in Green Bay, which with the Packers, I think they've got a partnership with Microsoft. So, and I do go back home once in a while, and that whole area is developing. It's got the Packer focus, but there's also an innovation center there. So I see a lot of the metropolitan areas that I think are doing pretty well. For anybody that's interested, I think there's so many options out there to find out more. But I often travel into the rural parts of the state too, and some of these small towns. And sometimes I thought about, like, the small towns been struggling with lack of broadband and things like that. But what if for some of these towns, especially the ones that, let's say, have a public library or something, if they could become like a central point for innovation, in some of these smaller towns where they have an
Mm.
innovation center maybe in their local library, and also broadband connections where they can bring in, through online technology such as Zoom. So so if you look at some of these small towns, they're dealing with a lot of problems, but I think they have a really limited amount of resources. So maybe there's a way to do outreach to some of these smaller communities and help them. And I'm sure they can bring a lot to the table as well. So
Yeah, thank you for that.
just a
I think-
few thoughts.
Oh, that's great. I love the different
Outreach, I guess,
systems that, the different
outreach
systems that
from
we've identified.
the larger cities to the smaller towns.
Yeah. We've identified a few different types of systems. We have like the entrepreneurial ecosystems that Matt highlighted at the beginning. And then talking about some of our larger corporations here within Wisconsin or the Midwest that are also helping foster innovation in which in a lot of new startups and different companies, but then also, what are the existing infrastructures that are in place that can help in different types of communities. So like the libraries may be a place that people can access resources in different ways. So I love thinking about that and how many different ways people can access that support, even though, the entrepreneurial journey can be, it can feel like you have a lot of options for support, but also is still that, fairly isolating as you're trying to build something brand new, whatever that might look like. So thank you for these contributions on this part of the conversation. I guess the next place that I want to go is, how about in today's current climate? We're dealing with, more than a year and a half in all of the changes that have been brought on with COVID, things that people are trying to just hold on in a lot of ways. There's a lot of ideas that are brewing and a lot of things that people are still building. There's trying to adapt your existing team and your existing resources to a lot of uncertainty. What is, tell me your story. What have you been experiencing and how have you been dealing with change and innovation in this year? Yeah, Benny.
I know one example for me was to change the way I worked. So to change, kind of the office, like kind of environment. So to change my work environment, as well as to change what I was doing with my time and to change my day-to-day activities.
How so? What did you change?
So for example, sales, kind of getting to know people. I kind of went back to the drawing board and said, hey, I've got to rethink how to do this and challenge myself to learn some new skills that I did not think I had. But then and kind of on the other side, now I have this new way of building relationships online that I wouldn't have thought that I would have had.
Yeah, learning how to build relationships online in an authentic and real way is quite the lesson that we have all learned. And I think, we've adapted it quite well in some ways. And we've really found, some opportunities there too. Anybody that hasn't chosen to speak up yet that is kind of thinking about maybe talking, do you have something you want to share? Yeah, Kaylee.
I guess I have more questions than necessarily what I've experienced per se.
Great.
Kind of relates to the first question and this one, but with the kind of the risk aversion and capital, I guess my perception is that it's harder to get funding for earlier stage kind of ventures and ideas. And I don't know if that's different in the Midwest because of risk aversion compared to other, like, let's say just San Francisco, Silicon Valley or something like that. Or if it's just that, those are the headlines you see. So I don't know the reality of those numbers. But I think because of the risk aversion, sometimes there's barriers put in place that are harder to jump through or more hoops to jump through. One specific example is, if you're familiar with, I think it's the Idea Advanced Seed Fund. Is that what it was called?
Okay.
For up until just this last round of funding, it was open to all UW system affiliated people except like UW-Madison and UW-Milwaukee. And like, you kind of get why that is, maybe, but it also
Yeah.
excludes a lot of people that still don't have access to capital for a variety of different reasons. But maybe the fact that they're opened it up is showing that change is happening, trying to take down some of those barriers. But I think in general, kind of the amounts of money that I see coming in from, I don't even know what to call it, COVID funding, into the state and the municipalities. And, there's a lot of talk of giving money in grants and however else to help businesses and innovation. I think thinking about how to remove some of those barriers, even on the earlier sides, right? And maybe taking more risks on the earlier side, and being willing to say that, this isn't a guarantee, and fund people in those types of situations.
Who has the response for that? Any experience?
I do know that, a lot of the COVID funding was for businesses that were existing, right? So, and the WEDC did have grants that went out to businesses that were innovating during COVID. And I know a few of the businesses, one's just a restaurant in my neighborhood that was able to take advantage of that. And I think it was good. But if you didn't launch your business pre-pandemic, a lot of that stuff didn't apply. And so I think that was one of the challenges there, because you had to kind of show that, I was in business and now my business was impacted somehow and I did something, or I'm doing something. Deal flow, in terms of venture funding, like everybody was struggling with it, because all the usual places that VCs would go and startups would go and everything to do deals kind of changed. And so the folks I know in Silicon Valley, all the big funds, they basically, deal flow was down 30% kind of during the pandemic, and they've been struggling to get it back up. So there's a lot of cash. They're just having trouble figuring out or meeting with enough companies to find the deals that they wanted to fund. So, and in terms of risk profile, I don't know the risk profiles have changed much for VCs. If anything, they're funding more deals or riskier deals because there's just so much capital that's there right now. That would be my experience.
What level of, did you say in VCs that was, you felt like there's more capital and they are taking more risks?
Yeah, I think there's been like records amounts of venture capital that's been deployed, and there's also been record amounts of venture funding that's available. In terms of, if you look at the fund sizes, the amount of money that the venture funds have sort of raised, there's a lot of capital available.
Anybody else? What have you been experiencing, or how have you managed to innovate? How have you managed to, even if you're not starting a new business or building a new venture, how have you managed to find some new ways to do things, build new ideas within an organization or whatever you've managed to do in this time? And to be clear, just getting by in this time, also great. We've been adapting and changing to a lot of things. So sometimes what we're doing with innovation is kind of percolating, kind of wading through something and figuring out, what we want to build next and what we want to do, even with our, if we've got an existing business and we're trying to figure out what's going to change, you don't always take action on all of that right away. So how are you managing on all of that? Yeah, Benny.
I know one interesting thing that is even personal to me is that community has kind of adjusted. So to say what I mean, I think the way that as an individual and as a business owner, the way that I kind of think about who's my tribe and where can I go for support and how do I kind of make sure I've got the right people around me has changed. I think I've kind of, we've kind of redefined what it could look like for us all to support each other in these difficult times and kind of like who's your neighbor in a virtual world, right? And kind of just changing community and who we surround ourselves with.
Absolutely. There's been a lot of ways that we can kind of try out new things, try out new groups, new people, new ideas. It felt like, at least last year in my experience, it was a lot of like, we don't know how any of this is going to work out. So like, I'm just going to throw everything I have right now at it and see what happens. And we gave each other a lot of grace. We gave each other a lot of space. And some things stuck and some things didn't.
I was gonna say, and maybe this is just my personality, but I just dove into something that was completely outside of what we would normally do. A new set of customers that hadn't been really talked to in a while, dove into their business models and what problems they're having that were just completely different than what I've worked on recently. And that gave, I don't know, just gave me a lot of energy to, I don't know, just to kept me energized as I was kind of stuck at home, still kind of in.
What made you dive into something so different?
I mean, first we heard a problem, but it's a small and kind of decline. It's ag, right? But like number of farmers, number of customers for us is declining, and it's big and hairy, and there's no easy answers. But I was like, but we're worried about it, and the customers are saying there's a problem, but we don't have an answer. So why not just go and try to start innovating and see if we can't come up with a solution, because then we get to solve a whole bunch of things all at once.
That absolutely sounds like the first step. When you hear a problem and you don't need to have the answer yet, but you're there to listen and learn a little bit more, that's an incredibly important part. And it sounds like a very, very careful way of approaching it.
I was just going to add, if you can hear me. Sorry, I don't have a camera on today. This is Ben at SuperNet. Commenting on what Andrew was just saying, one of the things that we had to do in the last 12 to 18 months, and we're not exactly a startup anymore, but the innovation that that we often have comes from our customers. So it's the customers that drive that innovation. Internet service is internet service at the end of the day. And I've been in the industry for 25 plus years, but when the pandemic hit, we had customers that were scrambling to do more, get more bandwidth, do more in the data center, things like that, so they could prepare for all of their employees to work from home properly. Things like that. And then, we had the opposite of that, customers trying to contract and figure out how to survive, how to get through the next 3, 6, 12 months, whatever it might take. And coming out of that, in 2021, I think we've discovered new ways to deliver, the services in different ways to meet customers' needs and different processes and that sort of thing to keep customers, as well as now that we are starting to see growth again, to go after new customers. So a lot of our innovation has really been driven by the customers themselves.
Yeah.
So.
And how are you hearing from them? Is that relationship building that you've already done with some of those key customers? Is it, putting out surveys and like intentionally gathering information? How are you going about that?
Yeah, I mean, it is more on the relationship building. I mean, some of these are, longtime customers we've had for a very long time, and, internet service to I think most of us, we can, we consider it pretty critical. and to most businesses, it's pretty critical. So, you know, it's been, you know, you've been with us for 15 years, and you know, we're going to help you get through this. And so we'll work with you, whether it's on the service that we're providing, scaling things back, you know, getting creative from a pricing perspective, you know, those types of things, to make sure that they, you know, that they survive, and that when they come out of this, we all come out of this, that they're still strong, and we're able to maintain that relationship and be part of their, you know, be a partner for them long into the future.
Yep. Thank you for sharing that, Vince. Any other thoughts on innovating amidst this uncertainty? All right, so the next area that I want to dive into then is, what's your advice? What advice do you have for people that want to be cultivating more innovation in their work with their team? Maybe more of your experience, or what best practices you have, or what questions do you have? If you want to put questions in the chat and not have to talk, that's allowed too.
Who's got the innovation silver bullet? That's what we really want to know.
Pretty much.
Just
pretty much.
snap fingers and innovation happens.
Mm-hmm.
No, as if anybody's read the book, The Hard Things About Hard Things, it's there's no silver bullet, just lead bullets, as I say. I shoot a lot of them. I always like that one.
Could you share that book recommendation in the chat?
Oh yeah, I'll put it. It's Ben Horowitz from Andreessen Horowitz. It's great read. I've seen some folks nodding, so they've read it. Cultivating innovation. So I mean, there's you know, it's a lot of it's getting the people on your team kind of what they need, right? You know, and I think some of it is, you know, so startups are hard because there's a lot of scarcity, right? There's scarcity of time, there's scarcity of capital, there's scarcity of lots of things, and it's easy to, if you're in a scarce environment, it's easy to kind of not be creative, I guess, right? You're just trying to survive. And so there's this balance, or this, you kind of have to be able to kind of think both ways, and realize that, well, yes, there is a bunch of scarcity, but our biggest asset is our ability to be creative and to look at things that nobody's looked at before, and to iterate quickly, and to, so you kind of use that to your advantage, but just be mindful that it's not constraining you needlessly, right? I think that's something that's easy to kind of get caught up in. We don't have what you don't have, what you don't have access to, what you're missing, as opposed to, what you can create.
Absolutely. I was actually thinking in that operating in scarcity, that can make it hard to change, because you've put so much into that thing that you're building. And so to, whatever you've invested in it, time, financial resources, and all of that can make that hard to change, even though you're also, in that startup mode, able to adapt and change quickly. There's, change is hard. I'm thinking about, innovation and change management are like very, very close together. How people on your team and within that you are working with experience innovation can be a stressful place. So what does that look like, and how do you manage that in a way that moves everyone forward?
I think along with that, and not just in startups, but giving people the space to have those curiosities and reflections, and then totally related, the flexibility that they need in their own lives, just given all the uncertainty with everything.
Yep. We've learned that lesson very well this year, haven't we? Yeah, having that space and kind of relying on people around you to take that vision of whatever you're building and whatever your organization is doing and contribute in their own unique way can move you a lot further faster. What other advice do you have in cultivating innovation?
This is more broad. And again, it kind of goes back to what I was talking about before about funding and whatnot. But something that I think is scarce and always maybe has been is finding capital that aligns with a particular startup's values. And, what does that look like? And that doesn't always mean trying to be the next so-called unicorn or whatever. And one of the companies or kind of funding companies that I've seen lately that looks intriguing to me, and I'm still researching, I don't necessarily recommend it, but is Calm Fund, which I think is Midwest based. They were previously Earnest Capital. And I'm just starting to look into this and think about, look, is that the kind of funding that would align more with my values and what I've struggled with over the last decade of finding capital, and then two, finding capital that aligns with my values. And that means a lot of things, right? That's a very broad statement.
Right.
And I guess maybe I just don't feel as informed about the capital that's available in Madison particularly, or Wisconsin. And maybe that's, on me as well, but.
What resources does anyone know that could help Kaylee find more information on what that could look like? Someone's got to know something.
I guess say what kind of funding is it? Are you looking for angels or traditional VC? It sounds like it's not traditional VC that you're looking for.
Kind of in between that, and that's where the Calm Fund, which is same as Earnest Capital, they just renamed, is the closest thing that I've seen ever that looks like something that would interest me in particular. And it's like a shared earnings agreement, and there's details of it that I don't know, but it's not the traditional VC where you're trying to just grow at all costs, and at least that's my perception of it. And I think the grow at all costs scares me for a lot of reasons, and one of the main reasons is losing sight of the reason and the values that are so important to making my company what it is.
Yeah, so there's I'm trying to remember some of the slow money. There's this sort of general area called kind of slow money funds that were more about sustainability as opposed to just pure growth. And so if you just Google that or Slow Money Wisconsin, I know some businesses that were kind of able to tap into that. It was more of a movement, I think, and some folks, some funds kind of identify with that, and some angels identify with that. So it's more mission driven businesses, or but they're kind of willing to give up returns in favor of sustainability or other kind of mission type attributes, I guess would be the way to kind of describe it. So you could look for that. If you reach out to the WEDC, has all he kind of manages the Wisconsin Angel Network. If you talk to anybody there, you can say, hey, here, who are the folks that are doing more slow money kind of stuff? Point you in the right direction. Starting point. All you need is probably talk to one or two, and then they're going to be plugged into everything, right? So just got to dig for a day, and then you can kind of get hooked in. It's not hard. The Social Good Summit would be an area. Maybe you're already plugged into that during the Ford Festival, but there's a lot of folks that probably involved with that could that would be connected into that, into those types of groups.
Sometimes knowing the right terms is really can feel like a secret world, and it's hard to know exactly what that is. So that's really helpful to know. I hope you can find some resources there, Kaylee. And now we have a little turtle mascot for slow money.
Going global.
There we go. There we go.
Something that was really helpful. I'm pie in the sky guy, but having like good people who understand what you're doing that can help you kill zombies, zombie projects, zombie features, things that, and just realizing like what is it we actually can do to actually make progress. You know, we got into a project that ultimately was going to take a legislation, and like that's not really our area of innovation.
Yes.
So we got to let that go and move on. So killing zombie projects and features was it's almost an answer to how do you innovate amid uncertainty.
Yeah, absolutely.
You just said that so you could get some brownie points so I could draw some zombies.
There we go.
Appreciate it.
Here to help. Good. Those are great. We've touched on a few of these, but I want to hear more about like what kinds of best practices, what kinds of tools do you need in your toolbox? What kinds of skills does it take to be able to take the ideas in your head and make something happen out of it? We've touched a little bit about it with, you know, some of the community and the support that we need in order to get things to happen. You know, being willing to kill the zombies, being able to find the things that are the most necessary. How do you know what that is? How do you, what kind of litmus tests do you have for your own work?
I always like kind of looking at things in other industries, right? You know, I think that, I mean, I think they're very far. They're not, you know, that many truly original ideas. Everything's kind of building on something else nowadays, and so I think if you're in you know, in a certain space, certain vertical, certain industry, you're looking to solve a problem, you can, you know, if you're good at connecting dots. So one of my favorite book of mine from a couple of years ago, it's a book called Range, which just taught, yeah. So Eric's nodding his head. So it's that basically it kind of, you know, talks about, well, you have folks that are experts in their field and spend, you know, their entire career researching one thing, and you know, typically that was sort of viewed as the path to success, is just, you know, you're just narrowly focused. And this book sort of made the case that you know, that there's also an equally important role for people that you know, are able to kind of work across genres, for lack of a better way of putting it, and have a lot of interesting stories about that. So I think, you know, you can bring range, or find people that can kind of bring that type of range to your thinking and your business. I think that's it's a good way to cultivate. Maybe it's more related to the other one, but I think it's a behavior to think about when you're looking at you know, look at what other folks are doing not in your industry.
That one, I read that this past fall, and I think one of those things where even experts in their field can get insular and can get you know, they form their own biases. So when they run up into new things, they're working off their old solutions. And there's a saying that maybe everybody here has heard, you know, what got you here isn't necessarily going to get you there. So we always have to be reinventing and open to kind of opening up the armor and letting new ideas and thoughts and experiences in. And you know, especially as founders, maybe you did what you could for the first part, but maybe more people need to come in for the next stage, or kind of lift and carry more of the load for the next journey.
And some of that might fly in the face of the zombies thing, right? Because if you've got your group of experts, right, that you're talking to, and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking, and they come back and say, oh no, don't do that, that's gonna, be a big, mess, right? Because that's what they've ever always experienced in their world. The other side of that is well, just because it didn't work for you, like, I'm coming at this differently somehow, right? I'm trying to solve the same problem that you've had that you just claim is unsolvable. I'm going to solve it a different way. So, so that's where, in some cases you also have to just, you kind of trust your own competencies and what you see in the market. And so, a lot of the big entrepreneurial stories are about folks that, risk doing something a little bit differently. But you got to balance that optimism then with, just sort of, a lot of self-awareness, right, about what's, what you can do and what you're capable of, and not end up delusional as an entrepreneur, because there's that happens too. So it's a big balancing act usually.
Absolutely.
Do you have a competing mascot for the opposite of the zombie?
What's an opposite of a zombie? That's a good one. Gosh, I don't know.
It should be somebody trying caviar for the first time.
Okay.
or like monkey brains. I don't know, something weird. Only the finest.
Right. Good. What other tools or skills or things that you need to consider to make innovation happen in your work? Does anyone have any other examples or things that you've been experiencing in this last year, or that you're thinking of trying to do that you're like, what is that going to look like?
One thing I've been trying to figure out is how to do because I've got a distributed team, figure out how to do a shared whiteboard. And I'm seeing what Eric's doing here, and I'm just kind of wondering what your setup is, because it's pretty cool.
Thanks. Yeah, I can share a little bit about that. So we're primarily here working when we do these. I'm kind of soloing on the board so that everybody has a chance to contribute and talk, and maybe not worry about getting up on the board or drawing. And so in this case, I'm just using a design or a drawing program that I'm comfortable with on an iPad with a Apple Pencil.
Okay.
But there are also a couple of tools. One of them that I've been exploring recently called Miro, Miro, that lets you set up some spaces that everybody can log into, and if you want more interactivity on a whiteboard or on a post-it notes and that sort of stuff.
Yep.
But yeah. So
there's also Mural, Mural, which sounds entirely too close to Miro. You have to pronounce it awkwardly different, but yes. And then even Google Jamboard, just a free tool that you can use through the Google stuff, is a pretty basic one, but you can just save it in your Google suite of in Google Drive. So that's a nice way to do that.
We actually use Google Jamboard sometimes when we're sitting in the same room to look at something similar or something together shared.
Nice. All right, I gotta check that out. Good, thank you.
Yeah. Andrew's another voice for Miro, Miro.com. I think some of those are just, you want to figure out how your team works together and how you want to use it. So setting up some plans for what to do with it, but they can be really great tools and really great resources. I believe they do have Zoom integration. So you can use them right within Zoom. Zoom has the whiteboard feature. It's, I don't know, fairly basic, right, Eric?
Yep. We haven't used it for a while.
Yeah, I think we used it in March of 2020 and then maybe not again. So yes. Any other tools or resources that you have for collaborating like that? What other questions do you have? What maybe what other ideas have you been thinking through during your Forward Fest experience, or anybody that hasn't spoken up yet? What are you thinking? If you have talked, you're welcome to talk to, but. Whimsical, that was another recommendation. I know I've used that for like building out websites and stuff in my very limited experience that I've been able to help with that. So also good resources.
Something, I'd jump in if you haven't talked to, I don't want to.
Mhm.
But
Go
something
ahead.
I'm hoping to do more of, or even just any of, is voice of customer research.
Mm,
And I've been reading a book called Deploy Empathy. It's a pretty new book, kind of more tailored towards the practice of doing it rather than kind of the abstract of customer research. And so I'm hoping to put that into action and do some voice of customer research. I think where I'm struggling the most is finding people to do the research with.
yeah. Tell me more about what distinguishes voice of customer research.
So just really using questions specific to my own business or your own business, and asking the customers, there's some scripts that she gives examples of. I don't remember them off the top of my head, but then taking those and tailoring them, and then at the same time, like not being leading and not being, it's not a sales pitch. It's just customer research, trying to get feedback and really creating that connection and that space for people to talk. Like you mentioned, having silence and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Good. Can you put that resource, that book, into the chat if you can find it?
Yeah, sure.
And then, yeah, there's a little chat here about Notion. That is a resource that we've been using that as we're building out Reloomed. Eric just mentioned that they have the sketching input, which I think was a pretty new feature, but I don't know about the live whiteboard. So I struggle with Notion and like keeping it current and maintaining it. So I'm still learning how to make the most of that. Any other tools or resources that you have?
I put the link in the chat, but I just want to follow up. I guess maybe another way of saying it is it's more like talking to customers. I mean, voice of customers, the word I use, I think they're interchangeable maybe, but it's more colloquial to say talking to customers. And I know as a software developer, that's something that is not my strong suit, right? Like, so I think that's why it piques my interest.
Yeah.
I think enticing or finding ways to engage users in the conversation beyond the software uses, even when you have a customer that's everything is going well, or a service business where things are going great, it can still be hard to engage people in those conversations if they're, busy and.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Absolutely.
It's been really hard to connect with customers, and I guess more just focusing on proxies has helped a lot, or at least allowing them to kind of introduce us to customers. Mapping out like every single third party that connects to them, and just kind of going down the list. And sometimes those people are looking for those customers too, and you can work together. So that's, yeah. Getting a farmer to pick up a cell phone is very hard, but talking to their seed dealers and their co-ops and their insurance guys and people who drop off propane and all those things that you don't think about so much, even their mail carriers, has yielded the conversations ultimately I was trying to get to. and I got their perspective on what I was digging into too. So sometimes you have to be a detective, but I get a much fuller picture through proxies.
Very interesting. A tool that can be useful for that is SparkToro. Have we heard of that one? That is, it's basically like aggregated data to identify like what your ideal customers are talking about, what they're reading, what websites they're visiting, and really it's for marketing purposes. But I think as you're building out new audiences and stuff, and trying to figure out who you're trying to talk to, it's a really helpful tool to be looking at. So SparkToro, TORO.com. All right, so in our last couple minutes, I just want to call your attention to the board and everything that Eric put up there. And I just want to hear if anybody has any thoughts on what's been put up there, anything that particularly sticks out for you. One of the things that we do when we finish up a conversation with leaders and teams in this format is we'll spend a few minutes looking at the board and just kind of identify, put a few stars up on those things that are either really intriguing or something that we want to follow up with or whatever that might be. So what are you noticing? What in this conversation sticks out to you?
I like all of the very well done drawings.
Thanks,
very, very well. No, especially the monkey. Like looking back, I'm like, that's wonderful.
So the visuals can be really helpful we'll send this out to folks who attended afterwards. The visuals are a really good reminder of, some of those things that we picked up on as key ideas. So we use that a lot as we're doing visioning and problem solving and stuff to kind of put some emphasis on something or help us think about something in a little bit different way. So thanks for calling that monkey out.
Quick poll for everybody, and just by a raise of hands. How many of you are prone to jumping on a whiteboard or grabbing a napkin or sheet of paper to jot out ideas as they come to you? I'd just be interested to know, as we talk to people, as I meet new founders and leaders, etc. There are certainly a group of people where that's something that they've kind of do it in small ways or little ways. And so visual thinking and that act of using the pen, the marker, et cetera, to externalize what's inside your mind, to put it out so that you can wrestle with it, so that others can see more clearly what you're talking about, et cetera, is something that we're huge fans of. And just as an aside, training and formalizing, improving some of those skills are things that we're very passionate about. But if that's something you're using, just know you're not alone. That visualizing is an important part of how you lead.
Absolutely. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. I know we've reached 4 o'clock and there's more events starting as we speak. So really appreciate the conversation and thanks for taking the time. All right, have a great rest of your week at Forward.
Are we gonna be sending stuff out?
We will send the visual out. Yep.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for attending.
You.
Thanks for contributing.
Yes, thanks
Looking forward to talking to you more on LinkedIn Beyond.